This episode of The Witch Wave is brought to you by Ritual and Shelter. Looking for a magical place to shop and hold space? Check out Ritual and Shelter in Homewood, Alabama. Browse through their bookshelves covering topics of magical history, theory, and practice, as well as tarot cards and oracle decks from well-known artists, and even decks created by local witches in Alabama. From teas, tonics, and tinctures to toad skulls and tourmaline towers, you can find all of these and so much more on their witchy website, ritualshelter.com, or in person. So lather up that flying ointment and travel down to Ritual and Shelter in Homewood, Alabama, or check them out online at ritualshelter.com. Did you run out of flying ointment? Well, they have that too. Hello, my friend. I am often asked about how people can get even more witch wave and more magic in their lives overall, and I have the answer. You can join me over on the Witch Wave Patreon. This is how you can hear from me and my other magical guests on a weekly basis via my Witch Wave Plus bi-weekly bonus episodes. And you get the regular Witch Wave episodes ad-free, and you get detailed show notes for all of it. And all Patreon members also get access to my monthly ritual workshops, which you can attend live or watch the recording of at your leisure throughout the month. Rewards for some tiers also include magical merch and contests where you can win witchly prizes, as well as early heads up about my workshops before they sell out, and opportunities to work with me one-on-one. And all backers get access to our exclusive digital coven, where you can connect to a community of other wonderful Witch Wave witches around the world. So head on over to patreon.com/witchwave and sign up. It's a magnificent way to get more magic in your life and to support the show. Thank you so much.
The world is filled with bewitching people, and you might be one too. Welcome to the podcast where art is magic is real, and reality is stranger than dreams. I'm Pam Grossman, and this is The Witch Wave.
Hello, and welcome to the Witch Wave. First, a bit of housekeeping. So, several folks have asked me to make the recording of my Artemis workshop available to download, and I have done so. So, you can go ahead and find it over at witchwavepodcast.com/shop. If you scroll down to where I have the rest of my workshop recordings, or you can click the link in my Instagram bio, which is at Phantasmaphile. And thank you so much to the many of you who emailed me and messaged me asking when it was going to be ready. It is ready. Second bit of housekeeping. As many of you know, I will be appearing very briefly, but very excitedly at Carnegie Hall as part of Jinx Monsoon's Valentine's Day show. I could not be more excited. I'm nervous. I'm giddy. I'm going to be making a little bit of magic on stage for everybody. And I believe that show is sold out, although I keep seeing that extra tickets keep getting released. So if you want to be there, keep an eye on that Carnegie Hall website. And again, that's on Valentine's Day, which is February 14th. And yes, indeed, it is my birthday, and I can think of no better way to celebrate. So speaking of houses, we are going to be talking all about them today, particularly of the haunted variety in this episode. Protective magic, also known as apotropaic magic, is one of the most popular forms of spell casting, and it's something that I predict we're going to be wanting and needing more of in the coming years. As for many of us, our sense of safety feels more precarious these days given the political climate and the climate. And while magic is not a replacement for protections in the material world, like, working locks on our doors and windows, it can absolutely enhance our sense of psychic safety and help us perhaps even keep negative energies at bay. At both our apartment in Brooklyn and at our little house in the mountains, our front doorways are surrounded by apotropaic magic, surrounded by protective amulets. Everything from witches' bells, whose sound is supposed to scare away bad spirits every time the door opens, to the purple hamsa, also known as a hand of Fatima, which is said to defend against the evil eye and welcome in abundance. And we have one hanging right next to our door frame. So being more mindful about how I engage with the spaces in which I dwell has helped me shift the energy within and around those spaces. And as I've gotten older, I've become more intentional about approaching the notion of home as a sanctuary, a place of protection and sacred living. I might not always be able to control things like leaks and mice and unruly neighbors, but I do sense that my house spirits, or apartment spirits as the case may be, are happy. And when I'm home, generally speaking, I feel happy there too. And yet I know that I'm not the first person to live where I'm living. And even if I was, there are spirits of the land that are far older than anything humans have built upon it. And so I'm interested in how our living spaces might be enchanted or haunted or some combination thereof. Which is why I was so excited to get to invite Leila Taylor back on the Witch Wave, and this time to invite her into my sonic home away from home, which is the podcasting studio I record out of here in Brooklyn. Leila's new book, Sick Houses, explores the trope of homes, both fictional and real, which are haunted with ghosts, memories, histories, shadows, and all kinds of subversive goings-on. And as with my last conversation with Leila, this is a chat that I wished would never end because she is just so brilliant and such a delight to share ideas with. And I hope our conversation will haunt you in a good way for many days to come. But before we get to that, first, let's check and see what's come through on the Witch Wire.
Who is it?
Witches.
Nora writes, Dear Pam, I wanted to thank you for being such a bright star in the world. I've been following your work, especially your podcast, for a while, and I find it tremendously enriching, fascinating, entertaining, and inspiring. Nora, you're making me blush. I, too, am playing at the intersection of art and magic. I'm a jewelry artist working with the ancient alchemical technique of vitreous enamel. Crafting my pieces is a magical act, and more often than not, my pieces, worn at the membrane between the body and the outside world, become supercharged on several levels. Created with intention and a conscious choice of materials and colors, they become layered with meaning as personal treasures, ritual objects, talismans, or tokens of transformation for my clients. It is the most fulfilling work. Lately, more and more magical people of all stripes have been finding their way into the studio with special commission requests for magical or ritual jewelry and or objects, and I'm taking this nudge by the universe quite seriously. Could you perhaps point me to any scholars and writers who specialize in the field of the talismanic in general, or contemporary art jewelry as magic specifically? I'm not a beginner, but I feel I need more knowledge to back up my often intuitive work. With love and appreciation. Nora, thank you so much for this gorgeous note. I so appreciate you taking the time to write. So yes, indeed, there are many places for you to find out more about talismans, so I'll just name a few that come to mind. And what I first recommend is that you familiarize yourself with what are called tables of magical correspondence. So, for many thousands of years, it has been believed by magical practitioners that there are sympathies or correspondences between everything from the planets to minerals to deities to the days of the week to plants to colors to angels. You get the idea. And there are many tables or charts that exist which list these various correspondences. Now, it's important to note that a lot of this comes from a German Renaissance occultist whose name was Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa. And his 3 books of occult philosophy is a very good foundational grounding, certainly in planetary magic and angelic magic. But as time went on, many other folks riffed off of his work and codified their own correspondences too. So these are not hard, fast rules, but these are correspondences that many people have used over now hundreds, if not thousands of years. 2 of the co-founders of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, Samuel Liddell Mathers and William Wynne Westcott, compiled their own lists in a manuscript that they titled The Book of Correspondences, and Aleister Crowley himself expanded upon their work and eventually would go on to publish his own lists in his book Liber 777 of 1909 and his arguably more accessible book called Magic in Theory and Practice, which was published in 1929 but is still in print today. Lots of these tables and ideas would then eventually trickle down into many Wiccan books, such as Raymond Buckland's Complete Book of Witchcraft, which first came out in 1986, which is also known affectionately in witchcraft circles as Uncle Bucky's Big Blue Book. And of course, you can just Google these magical tables of correspondences, and you'll see more than you probably ever cared to know about the topic. Now, you will note also that everything I just cited comes from this very Western European lens. These are all white dudes, and so a lot of their tables are a kind of mishmash of medieval planetary magic and a very exoticized Judeo-Christian angelic magic or attempt at Kabbalistic magic sometimes, with some other pre-Christian deities thrown in, such as Egyptian gods and Norse gods and Celtic gods and so on. And often they don't include deities or plants or stones or references from many other cultures around the world. However, happily, many other folks have gone on through the years to add those deities from Hindu and East Asian and West African traditions and so on. So you can find an example of this that Judika Illes wrote for the Library of Esoterica's witchcraft book that I co-edited for Taschen. So yes, if you want to have a solid jumping off point about magical correspondences, those are some really good places to start. But finally, another book you might want to check out, which is more broadly on this topic, is called The High Magic of Talismans and Amulets by Claude Lecouteux. That's Lecoutaux. Again, this book has a primarily Western occultist point of view, but it's a very solid overview on the concepts of talismanic magic, including jewelry. I hope that helps, and happy crafting. Now, on to my guest. Leila Taylor is a Brooklyn-based writer, speaker, and designer whose work focuses on the intersection of history and horror and the Gothic in contemporary culture. She's the author of the new book, Sick Houses, Haunted Homes, and the Architecture of Dread, which is out next week and is so magnificent, and Darkly, Black History and America's Gothic Soul. Her essays have appeared in Us, the complete annotated screenplay, The Repeater Book of the Occult, The New Urban Gothic, Global Gothic in the Age of the Anthropocene, and the graphic novel Bitter Root. Leila joined me here in person in the studio, and we did record video for this. So that video will be up on my YouTube channel. If not now, then very, very soon. Leila Taylor, welcome back to the Witch Wave, and welcome to our first recorded episode on video. Hello.
I'm honored. I'm honored and thrilled.
I am so honored that you're here, and I was so excited to do this with you because, as I've told you many, many times, you are one of my favorite thinkers and writers. And so when I was like trying to get courageous and make the leap finally into video, I was like, well, Leila, A, you're close by. Let's be honest.
Exactly.
And B, I just knew that we were going to have a great conversation. So first of all, congratulations on your new book. This is Sick Houses, Haunted Homes, and the Architecture of Dread. And it's your follow-up to Darkly, Black History and America's Gothic Soul.
Mm-hmm.
So why haunted houses? Why was that the topic that you landed on and just knew you wanted to dive into next?
Well, the haunted house has always been my favorite horror movie genre. And after Darkly, I was kind of diving into fiction. So I started writing a haunted house story. And I got fixated on this particular photograph that I saw in the introduction to the book of a slave quarters or a slave house in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
And its architecture is so strange and eerie. And even before I knew what it was, I thought there's something odd and wrong about this structure. And then later I found out that it was a slave house.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, well, there you go,
Mm-hmm.
you know? As I was doing my research for this fiction novel, I got really, really into the research part of it. And I realized that's kind of where my passion was actually digging into sort of the cultural history, getting into the movies and things like that. And that I'm also not a great fiction writer. I realize that myself.
I doubt that. I would love to see or read anything that you write in the fictional world. You're going to be incredible at it, but carry on.
I've also always been fascinated by houses and homes. Like I kind of fall in love with buildings. I get kind of haunted, so to speak, by certain buildings for whatever reason they are. And I didn't want to talk just about haunted houses because what I was really interested in is what is haunting, what is ghostly, what is eerie, what is, macabre about homes and houses that we use in fiction, that we use in movies. Like, why is the home such a mainstay of horror? Basically, it was the first Gothic novel, Castle of Otranto.
Yep.
Haunted house story. Why does this genre stick for so long in so many different ways? And I think it's because it's our home.
Right.
It's not just a house. It's about how we interact with these buildings, whether it's, a Victorian mansion or a suburban tract house or whatever. This place that is our most intimate space, our most private space, the place where we're supposed to feel the safest and the most comfortable,
Yeah.
the haunted house is an invasion of that space.
Yes.
And it's kind of the most personal kind of invasion you can have. I compare it to Exorcist movies
Yeah.
because I feel like it's the same thing. It's about an entity taking over yourself.
Your private vessel.
Exactly.
Whether it's where you're living or the body that our spirit dwells in.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I have to admit, like, when you first sent me the arc for this, and I was so honored I got to read it early. I was so excited. But when you sent me the arc, I was like, haunted houses. That's interesting. Because I will totally admit, like, I'm such a wuss. I don't think I've ever been in a haunted house, like at an amusement park or for Halloween. Like, I'm so scared.
Yeah.
I don't like things popping out at me.
Me too.
Really?
I hate the haunted house attractions. I never go to haunted houses on Halloween. Because me too.
Yeah.
I'm chicken.
Right.
I
It's
hate
terrifying.
jump
Jump scares are the fucking worst.
I never go to haunted houses
Right?
on Halloween.
Yeah, I've never done that. I've also never been on a water slide. And I feel like there's probably some connective tissue there. I can't figure it out right now.
Yeah.
And so at first I was like, is that what this is about? And then I was like, oh, no. This is about the trope of haunted homes and haunted spaces that captures our imagination, certainly in horror movies. But also, some of these spaces are like real life spaces.
Yeah.
They're not just fiction. You have some real homes and you tell the real stories of those homes.
Yeah.
And you kind of categorize all of these under this rubric, sick houses.
Mhm.
So can you break down that title for us?
It actually came from a Shirley Jackson book, The Haunting of Hill House.
Mm-hmm.
In the book, the narrator describes Hill House as being a sick house, that there's something wrong with it, that there's something kind of evil inherent in it, that it's diseased. I think they call it a diseased house or a psychotic house. And again, because I kind of feel like houses are sort of human in their own way, I like the idea of a sick house or a crazy house or a psychotic house or a diseased house.
Yeah.
Because it feels visceral and it feels of the body, you know? So that's where the term sick houses is from.
It's
Shirley
wonderful.
Jackson.
And you break the idea of the sick house into these different categories, these different chapters. And maybe you can walk us through some of them. Like, what is the taxonomy of the sick houses?
Well, I start off, the first chapter is American houses. And that's really about what the house means to us culturally and what home ownership means to us culturally. Because so much a part of the quote unquote American dream is home ownership.
Yep.
And your identity as an American often is tied into home ownership.
Yep.
And a lot of horror movies play on that. They play on the vulnerability that people have when buying a home. They play on the financial stress that people have about owning a home. So it talks about how home ownership became sort of the goal as an American and what it means when you move into a new house.
Yep.
And another trope that happens in horror movies all the time is the walkthrough with the real estate agent. Yeah. Who's kind of shady and is keeping a little secret.
Yep.
There's always question like, why is this so cheap? Why has this been on the market for so long?
Yes, indeed. Yep.
There's the what's the catch scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's sort of the process of moving into a home and taking ownership over that space. And I think, again, if it's a pre-owned home, or maybe even not, you're kind of picking up someone else's story. I think all that residue, for lack of a better word, or the history of those spaces.
Word residue.
Right.
Yes.
I also like traces.
Yeah.
Like the traces of what was left behind might still be there.
Yeah.
So you're kind of picking up someone else's story.
Yes.
And so I think not only do horror movies play along that idea, but I think the idea of whether or not your home is really yours is kind of an important idea.
Yep.
Like, why are renters thought less of than owners?
So some of the films that you talk about, I'm sure listeners would even guess. I mean, we talk about Poltergeist. You talk about in the book, you talk about the Amityville Horror. And then I was really happy that you talked about the Jordan Peele film Us, right? That you write about in the book?
Yeah.
Which, that movie just is so chilling and so disturbing. Like spending time with it again via your words was like such an uncomfortable in a good way experience. Because when I saw the film, it was one of those movies that I was like, I don't know if I can ever watch this again because it really chilled me. So how did you decide which of the films you wanted to tell in the story of the American houses section?
Amityville Horror was a big one. One, because it also is a real house that has its own story. And the real story sort of overlaps the fictional film. But one of the big touch points in that movie is this is their first home. This is a big step. It's a blended family. They're taking that next vital step on the rung to fulfillment or whatever. And the fact that it's not easy for them, that they're going into this space knowing that something really, really, really horrible happened there. And that's why they got it cheap. And the thing I loved about Amityville Horror is because they have that conversation up front. The immediate question is, do we want to actually move into a space where this horrible thing happens?
Exactly.
Is it worth it? And finance plays a big role in their decisions. Like there's some other movies that are like this where they sink all of their money into this property that's their dream house. Again, like it's not just any other house. It's the big house. It's the house where they're going to grow their family. It's the house where their business is going to develop. They put all of their money into it. So what do you do when ghosts or entities or monsters or creatures are trying to drive you out?
Yep.
When all of your, livelihood is placed into this thing and making those decisions based on money.
Yep. It feels too, at least in American culture, like buying a home is supposed to be this marker of adulthood, like this rite of passage. And to me, some of the haunted houses, they sort of strike me that there are these spaces where you feel like you're finally in charge of your life.
Yeah.
And it's like, no,
you're not.
You're not.
Not at all.
Something else is still in charge.
Yeah.
And that lack of control or this realization that you're not as in control of your like destiny as you thought you were, it is really unsettling too, right?
Yeah, yeah. And once you start noticing it, you see it everywhere. There's often a dad who's the patriarchal figure of the family, who's supposed to be the breadwinner, who's supposed to be in charge of this situation, who's responsible for all this, who realizes that they are not in charge.
Yep.
That no matter what they do, they're not the ones in control of their home anymore. A lot of alcoholics. A lot of horror movies have alcoholic dads.
I mean, The
who start
Shining.
drinking.
Hello.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not really a home, it's a hotel.
Yeah. The Shining was one of those where it's like, I want to talk about it, but it's like, I got to live the number.
Of course.
Yeah.
And something you write in the book that I love, you write, a ghost is the ultimate invasion of privacy. And then later you say, a house that is haunted is a house under constant surveillance. So it's this idea too of like, we're constantly being watched or listened to by some entity. And it got me thinking as well of like how I do not use Google Home or Alexa or any of those things.
Me neither.
And we had one briefly. And then, all the stories came out about like it's listening to you all the time. And of course, this phone probably is too, as we know. And yet there's something about, I don't know, psychically it being like this little orb just in your home that makes me go like, that feels haunting to me in a way.
And not even just in your home, but somehow in control of your home.
Yep.
Like I know that there's a new sort of theme that's come up in a lot of horror movies where there is some sort of, digital home helper that's taken over.
Yes.
And where your electricity, your heat, your food, all the things that you're supposed to have control over are taken over by, this machine, this computer. I feel like we're halfway there. Anyway, as a society.
Don't say it. Don't say it. One thing I wanted to bring up before we move into the next kind of house, but with American houses, I didn't realize that there was a court case in 1991 that's colloquial called the Ghostbusters ruling.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So there was a case where, oh my God, now I'm going to mess the name up.
Stambovsky versus Ackley.
Yes. Yep. Where this fellow bought a house and it was in escrow. He's in the process of buying this house and realized that it was getting a lot of ghost tours, a lot of tourists, a lot of like ghost hunters. There was a lot of activity happening on his property. And it turns out that that house was notorious for being haunted. It was thought of as being haunted, right? And I think the original owner actually would post articles in like the paper, like, come see the ghost house or whatever. Like, they weren't hiding it.
So this was like a tourist destination.
It was known.
Okay.
It was known, like people would go to take pictures of the ghost
Mm-hmm.
house. He didn't know that. So he sued to cut the deal and get his house back, and he won. And I think it's the first case about a haunted house or a house being haunted or suing someone over a haunted house. And it isn't so much about proving that there's a ghost, about
Right.
proving that it's actually haunted, but the reputation
Yes.
of it being haunted was enough to cause mental strife and enough to
Exactly.
get him out of the deal.
Was
Yeah.
it that he was disturbed by the notion that it even could have been haunted and it should have been disclosed? Or was it more that these people were like trespassing on his house because they wanted to take pictures or have tours or whatever?
I never read anything about him being anxious or worried about ghosts. I think it really was about like invasion of privacy.
Interesting.
And if you found out that your home was a tourist attraction. I think just recently, the Carrie Bradshaw house in Sex and the City.
The brownstone in Manhattan.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the owner is getting a fence because people are getting their picture taken and they're going up to the door.
Exactly. So it's
that's
more of
what
a
it was.
nuisance than a haunting.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm so interested, though, in this notion that some houses have this reputation. And I'm curious, like, does a realtor have to disclose, like, if someone is, like, brutally murdered in a house, for example? Like, what is there a legality around that you're aware of?
Depends on the state.
Okay.
Most states have disclosure laws or some kind of disclosure laws. And I'm also talking to someone who's never bought a house. So, this is a lot of not my own personal experience, but research.
Mm-hmm.
And usually it's if there was structural damage, if there was a lot of repairs, if there was something about the property that might cause problems for the owner later on, they would need to disclose that. But there's also another type of disclosure, and I'm going to forget the name of it. Yeah, exactly. It's one of those. It's a really good word that I can't remember at the top of my head. It's when someone died, not of natural causes, but if there was a violent death in the house or a suicide. There are some states where, and this law has changed.
Mm-hmm.
So don't quote me on what's happening right now in 2025 because it changed.
I won't
But
be
that was-
litigious with you, Leila, I promise.
Thank you. Please don't sue me.
Yes.
I have a little footnote at the end of this saying,
Exactly.
please don't take any legal
Disclaimer.
advice. Yeah.
Yes. But some realtors have to disclose if something awful happened in a house.
If they're stigmatized property.
Stigmatized
Knew it was going to come to me.
property.
That's what it called, a stigmatized property.
Whoa.
And that's like if a murder happened or something. So
Yeah.
if your dear old grandmother died peacefully in her bed,
You don't
That's-
have to tell anybody.
that's fine. But if, there was a gruesome murder like the Amityville house,
Yeah.
in some states at one point, you would have to use that as part of the disclosure.
That's so interesting. And do you think it's because there is some belief that there might be an unsettled ghost or presence? Like, why do you have to tell about one and not the other in some of these states, in your theory?
I think because for some people, it is a big enough decision and a big enough line in the sand to not purchase something.
Mm-hmm.
I think in some way in our minds or whatever, even if you don't believe in ghosts or not, knowing that something has that kind of violent history is disturbing to people.
But
and
isn't
if they
that
find
so
it,
interesting,
yeah,
though?
yeah,
To me, it is a signal that there is some, I don't know, superstition.
Yeah.
Or there's something
yeah,
in us that senses.
yeah.
Because otherwise you'd be like, who cares, right? You'd be
It was
like,
in the past. Yeah,
right,
yeah.
right. If someone died peacefully versus not, the
What does
fact,
that leave?
what is it? Exactly, the
Mhm.
residue, getting
Yeah.
back to the residue again. Oh
Yeah.
my God, I'm getting the creeps. Stigmatized homes or
Yes.
stigmatized houses. I mean, that could be like it's not as good of a title
It's
as
a good
your
one.
title is, but that's what a lot of these
It's a
different
sick
homes
house.
are that you write about.
Mhm.
On that note, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. This episode of The Witch Wave is brought to you by Dear Antigone. If you're here at The Witch Wave, you probably identify as a witch or are at least witch curious. So if you've been craving a Witchcraft 101 course, you are in luck. Introducing Magic Lessons by Dear Antigone. In this self-paced course, Antigone guides you through the art of connecting with your intuition and inner magical powers and guides in the unseen realms. Learn all about correspondences, practices, spellcrafting, and general magic goodness so you can hone your powers and live the life you want to lead. Now, this isn't a one-size-fits-all program. It's a journey crafted to tap into your inner wisdom and reveal your unique magic. Work with your lineage and the soul threads that call to you. Plus, you'll join a community of kindred spirits on the same path, learning, growing, and supporting each other along the way. There's no pressure and no deadlines, just the freedom to explore at your own pace. Be the witch you want to be. Head over to dearantigone.com and learn more about magic lessons today. That's Dearantigone.com. The Witch Wave is sponsored by BetterHelp. What are some of your relationship green flags? We often hear about the red flags that we should avoid, but what if we focused more on looking for green flags in friends and partners? If you're not sure what they look like, therapy can help you identify green flags. These are the little signs that show us that someone is a good person, someone is cool, someone is worthy of our time and attention, and will hopefully be someone we can have a positive, healthy relationship with, whether that's a platonic friend, a potential coworker or collaborator, or a potential romantic interest. Some of my green flags are little things, like that they're kind of service people, like wait staff and bus drivers. Some of my medium green flags are like when a potential collaborator is willing to make time for a coffee or brainstorming session. And some of my big green flags are for things like if a person has a real attitude of gratitude and appreciation for the beauty and wonder and absurd hilarity of life, and they're not constantly complaining. I can't stand that. Look, some complaining is healthy, but if you also tell me about something wonderful you've noticed or experienced or learned, for me, those flags are green, green, green. And being able to identify these green flags are how we find good people to share our lives with. But it takes self-awareness and commitment to keep recognizing these positive signals. That is where therapy can help. And that is where therapy has helped me so much over the years. I know some people think therapy is just a place to vent and to experience catharsis, but it is also a place to help identify what is meaningful to you, what a positive relationship looks like, and what your green flags are. I've said it 1,000 times. I'll say it 1,001. If I could wave a magic wand and have everyone on earth go to therapy, I would. It has helped me so much. And now therapy is more accessible than ever with BetterHelp. BetterHelp is fully online, making therapy affordable and convenient, serving over 5 million people worldwide. You can access a diverse network of more than 30,000 credentialed therapists with a wide range of specialties. And you can easily switch therapists at any time at no extra cost. Discover your relationship green flags with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/witchwave today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/witchwave. Welcome back to the Witch Wave. The next section, you write about what you call brutal houses.
Mm-hmm.
I love this section so much, and I love it even more now because I just saw the film The Brutalist.
Which I haven't seen yet.
It was brutal. I know everyone's saying that. Well, here's what I'll
Okay.
say.
Okay.
So Matt and I went this past weekend, in the theaters. You know, it's like a 3.5-hour movie. There's an
Yeah.
intermission.
There's an
And
intermission?
yeah.
I didn't know that.
The first half, we got to the intermission. I was like, honey, I love this. This is so good. This is like true, like, cinema. Like, it just felt like an epic, beautifully made film.
Yeah.
And then, in my opinion,
Okay.
in the next half of the movie, they just make some big melodramatic swings, and the writing of it and how the characters navigate some of the things that are revealed. It's just so over the
Oh,
top. And if
yeah.
they just like restrained it a little more, I think it
Yeah.
would have been stronger. And instead they really go for the like Oscar moments in a way that I'm like, oh my God. However, for listeners that aren't aware, the whole film is essentially about this architect. I think it's a fictionalized guy. I don't think he's a real architect who actually existed. He's an architect. He's a Jewish man. He's a World War II immigrant, expat. He's fleeing. And in his prior life, and this is not a spoiler, it's revealed pretty early on in the film, you come to be aware that he was this amazing architect in the Brutalist style. And again, I'm not giving too much away. The meat of the film is that this past of his is discovered and he gets commissioned to design this epically huge, monumental building in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And because you haven't seen it and because people watching or listening haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil the end, but I will say that the thesis statement of your book and this movie, like they really, there's a lot of resonance there.
Okay.
So essentially this section of Brutal Houses, you're talking about the Brutalist style of architecture and how that style of architecture is, well, why don't you actually, because I'm just going to like tell you about your own book now. Tell me why you decided to focus on Brutalist architecture and that movement in a book about sick houses.
Yeah. Well, again, I started with a movie or book, A Clockwork Orange, also High Rise, the J.G. Ballard book, and the movie that came from that, High Rise. And also some horrible situations that have happened in those kinds of housing. And I kind of worked backwards from there. And part of the brutalist architecture ethos is like concrete was relatively new in terms of building sort of housing. It was cheap. It was using materials that were sourced in the land. It was kind of a proletariat everyman material that could be molded into anything. So there was a lot of possibilities in concrete.
Yep. It's almost like the Play-Doh of architecture.
Yeah.
You can like put it into any form or any mold.
Yeah. So ingrained in the material, so to speak, is a kind of idealistic notion about architecture that we could build homes that would better people's lives socially somehow. So 2 different types of concrete homes, or brutalist homes. There's kind of the super villain, James Bond.
The Lair.
Which is extravagant and kind of cold and maybe sort of empty and also seemingly architecturally impossible. Like you see these photos of a home sort of cantilevered over a cliff and it looks like it just fall into the sea.
Yes.
Homes that have so much space, there's very little in them because there's so much space. So it's a very minimalist thing. And all those things do not read like home to people. They don't read like intimacy. That's why they think of them as being layers. So there's like the fancy concrete homes, but concrete also became the building material for housing developments, for institutions, for government buildings, for schools and things like that, where it was kind of quantity, you know?
Yes.
But again, the idea of concrete was to how can we make architecture better for people? And a Corbusier building was built. It's kind of like the father of all of this. After the war, there was this big need for housing developed because homes were decimated. So he built a housing development, basically an apartment building in Marseille. I think it's absolutely beautiful, and I think it's sort of a classic of modernist architecture. But the idea behind it was that not only would it be housing, but it would be an entire village, an entire city in this one structure. So there'd be a shopping mall, there'd be a school, there'd be a beauty salon, there'd be a restaurant.
You never have to leave.
You never have to leave. All of your needs would be taken care of in this building.
Yeah.
And
it's kind of utopian.
It's utopian.
At a really tiny scale.
Yeah. And utopias
Compressed
never work.
utopia. Yep.
Designed utopias never, ever work.
Yep.
And usually buildings like this, like Marseille, originally the people who would be living there be very sort of city-oriented. It'd be very street level. Everyone walking around, everyone kind of integrated with each other. This building was kind of in the outskirts. Again, it's a high rise kind of by itself, so it's isolated.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do when you have sort of a community-oriented culture that's suddenly put in a very controlled environment in a very limited space?
Mm-hmm.
So there's movies like Shiver by David
Yes.
Cronenberg that
Yes.
also takes place in...
Which, again, I'm too wussy to watch. But I loved reading about it in
Yeah.
your book.
If you don't like body horror, then
I
don't.
I don't. I know. I
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
the occult, and I'm so wussy about so
But not
much horror
grossing.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not good at gross. But carry on.
That and also high rise. They are buildings that were built that were supposed to make people's lives better and more convenient. So all of your amenities are taken care of. There's a clinic in the building. Again, they're usually isolated, a little bit further from the city center, right? And the more you depend on amenities to survive in these buildings, the more the building kind of has control over you.
Yes.
And the more you're kind of susceptible to failures of that building. The more you need the building, the more the building becomes your source of survival.
Yep.
And the real counterpart to that I talk about is the Pruitt-Igoe housing complex in St. Louis. And how that, again, was an idealized dream of taking tenement houses and moving thousands of people, mostly Black people, into this, I think there were 16 or something, high-rise concrete building structures. But of course, they tried to think, we'll make your life better, and there'll be a school, and there'll be this and that.
Yep.
But you can't erase all of the social problems. You can't erase economic disparities.
Yeah.
You can't erase, systemic racism.
Yep.
You can't erase all the social problems by design,
Right.
by just making the building a little bit different, you know?
Right.
So it's famous for essentially being a failure. And it very quickly, because it was so big, there weren't enough maintenance. There weren't enough people to take care of it. Because the income level of the tenants was lower, they couldn't afford to pay for repairs in the building. Crime started taking over. The building started emptying out, and there's been more robberies, more violent crime. The police stopped going there. The post office stopped delivering there. Like packages stopped delivering there. There would be, windows broken, pipes busted in the winter. There's one instance where it was this brutal winter. Pipes burst, and just ice just coated the whole place in the inside. And the tenants, again, were responsible for those repairs, which they could not afford to
exactly.
make. Yeah.
Exactly.
Also, the elevators were really weird. Like, they didn't stop at every floor. They would stop at every, third floor, fourth floor. So there would be instances where you would either have to walk up or down a couple of flights. Those elevators would break. The lights would be off in the stairs.
Oh my
Garbage
God.
would build up.
Yeah.
All of these really kind of scary things happening in the deterioration of this house. Within the movie High Rise, is in the book
Wow.
High Rise. They talk
Wow.
about the elevator failure.
Yeah.
They talk about the broken windows.
So am I remembering, Leila, you brought up Clockwork Orange earlier. Was
Yes.
that filmed at these houses, or was that the
No.
Marseille house? Or am I
Yeah.
conflating them all?
Oh, yeah. Clockwork Orange was filmed in Thamesmead in
Okay.
England. And that was
Okay.
another utopian,
Brutalist.
architectural brutalist concept.
Right.
Where, again, it was outside of London.
Mm-hmm.
There would be shops. There would be the pub.
Yep.
All your needs would be taken care of,
Yeah.
right? Well, the transit system didn't go to Thamesmead. There was transit issues.
Yep.
So it was harder for people to go back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
They arranged the building so there were kind of above level, like there was parking, like kind of street level parking situation. And then the entrances to the buildings would be above that, which essentially created this maze of darkness on
Yeah.
the street level.
Oh my gosh, Leila.
Right?
It's so upsetting.
creepy. It's so
Well,
disturbing.
another thing I was struck by, and we'll move on from brutal houses in a moment, but I was really struck by how you write about these houses often as like they're fortresses, but they're also kind of these like mausoleums or
Mm.
tombs.
Mhm.
I don't want to give too much away, but the section in the Brutal Houses chapter where you write about Frank Lloyd Wright,
Mm.
and I
Yeah.
mean, I'll just tell it really
Yeah,
quickly, which is I love his architecture. I think a lot of people are familiar with that style of his.
Yeah.
I did not realize that his family was like brutally murdered.
Yeah.
And then he moves to, was it San Francisco? No.
LA.
LA.
Yeah,
He moves
moved
to
to
LA
LA.
and starts designing in this more like, I guess you could call brutalist adjacent style. As you write in the book, it feels like he's inspired by the tombs of like pre-Columbian temples, right?
Yep.
And I love the point you make. You're like, I can't draw a straight line from the
Yeah.
thing he experienced to him suddenly designing these like mausoleums or tombs, but like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Like, is he working something out through his buildings?
Yeah, like at that time in his life, his career was a little bit kind of a slump, and he's kind of known for the prairie and these prairie houses, very low, flat wood houses, or houses made of wood and stone and things like that. Again, concrete was new. So I think he was one of the first to use concrete in residential housing, right? And he was using it as an experiment, right? Because you could mold these bricks into whatever you wanted, whatever shape you wanted.
Mhm.
So his lover and his children, his work studio was at this, it's called Taliesin. Taliesin? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't want to give it all away either, but yeah, a brutal murder happened there.
Yeah.
And he went to LA, he went to California and saw an expedition on Colombian architecture, essentially.
Yeah.
And was inspired by Mayan temples and things like that.
Yes.
So if you look at his LA houses, they look like Mayan temples.
Yeah.
They look like pre-Columbian.
It's like that ziggurat
Yes.
style.
Yeah.
Which,
With the-
P.S., the Mayans and the Aztecs, I mean, they did a lot of intense, brutal
Yeah.
stuff in those temples,
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So that's just interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know. All right.
Yeah.
I'm giving myself the chills. And this is the witch wave. So we have to now dive deep on my favorite section of the book. And I love the entire thing. But the section of the book you write called Witch Houses just filled me with such glee. And I got a preview of this, as did about 200 other people at the
Yeah.
Occult Humanities Conference that I co-organize with Jesse Bransford every other year, roughly. You were one of our amazing speakers 2 years ago, and you did this whole presentation on witch houses. And it like really, I could feel like new neural pathways forming in my brain as you spoke. So I was so happy to get more of that in this book. On that note, we're going to take another quick break and we'll be right back. This episode of The Witch Wave is brought to you, as it so often is, by Mithras Candle. In ancient times, candles were more than mundane sources of light. They held sacred significance, embodying hope, renewal, and comfort during the darkest hours. And with my friends at Mithras Candle, this tradition is upheld with reverence. Made by the hands of my mythic and scientific pals in Philadelphia, each Mithras candle is a testament to purity and craftsmanship using the most sacred of materials, beeswax. Picture the gentle flicker of Mithras beeswax candles, carrying that gorgeous natural aroma of honey and floral notes. And while their Byzantine hand-dripped halcyon pillars steal the show, Mithras offers a variety of shapes and colors, including seasonal delights like the upcoming pink for spring. Collaborations for 2025 include a partnership with another Witch Wave friend, Zoo's Incense, giveaways with your favorite witchy brands, and an exclusive luxury line of 24-karat gold and silver leaf candles inspired by angel magic. Are you ready to illuminate your space with arcane luxury? Visit mithrascandle.com today and use the new offer code WitchWave to enlighten your world with 25% off your first order. That's M as in magic, ITHRAS candle.com and use offer code WitchWave, all one word, for 25% off your first order. This season of The Witch Wave is brought to you by Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab. For 20 years, indie scent artist Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab, known affectionately as BPAL, has been formulating perfume oils for each month's full moon, inspired by their colorful names and descriptions in historical almanacs. 2025 will be no exception. Look for their monthly launches called A Little Lunacy, which include not only these limited edition scents for fellow lunatics, but also an ongoing series of perfumes inspired by classical artworks, and some which raise funds for a variety of charitable causes. The lab's general catalog is teeming with perfume oils, hair gloss sprays, beard oils, and bath oils, which can be yours year-round, covering a truly bewildering range of scent types and inspirations that include cinema, Gothic literature, and occultism. To that end, BPAL recently brought back a recurring scent series called An Evening with the Spirits, drawing from legends and historical accounts of Victorian-era spiritualism. These haunting scents, such as Psychodynamic Discharge and the Fox Sisters, will remain in Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab's web shop well into 2025. Month by month, year by year, the lunacy continues at blackphoenixalchemylab.com. I am obsessed with Zoo's incense, which is why I am so excited to announce that I have partnered with them on an exclusive Witch Wave incense blend just for you. The Witch Wave blend is inspired by Artemis, goddess of the moon, the hunt, the wild. It contains sandalwood, orris root, myrrh, black storax, mugwort, ambrette seed tincture, and organic ylang-ylang essential oil. And I cannot tell you how fun and magical it was to collaborate with the folks from Zoos and come up with this blend for you. You can order your Witch Wave incense blend by going to witchwavepodcast.com/shop, and you'll see it there. And this is a small batch, limited edition, so we'll see how long it lasts. I also want to encourage you to go to Zoos' site and order their incense from them directly because they are so incredible. They have 9 incense blends currently available, and they are handmade and hand-rolled, all natural, and all of their ingredients are organic or wild-crafted and made with whole plants, seeds, roots, woods, tree resins, and tinctures. Zoos also offers hand-cast, concrete burners, charcoal, raw aromatics like frankincense and myrrh, and incense supplies. Check it all out at zoosincense.com, and if you use promo code WitchWave, you'll get 10% off. So that's right, you've got 2 places to go. One is witchwavepodcast.com/shop to get our exclusive Artemis-inspired Witch Wave incense blend. And you can get everything else over at zoosincense.com. That's ZOUZ incense.com, and use offer code WitchWave for 10% off everything else. Thank you, Zoos. Welcome back to the Witch Wave. So, what is a witch house by your definition?
Yeah. My definition of a witch house, the house is defined by the witch. And these witch houses, I keep using quote marks for people who are listening, not watching. They are usually a house owned by a single unmarried woman, older, unmarried, childless woman, for whom domesticity and child rearing are not the primary purpose. They live alone. And there's a fear of spinsterhood.
Yes.
There's a fear in this country of being an old woman living by herself with cats.
Yep.
The cat lady.
Yep.
And I'm like, that is my dream.
Yeah.
That is my dream scenario.
I mean, honestly, same. And look, I'm a happily married lady,
Yeah.
but like I'm basically living in a witch house.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, and my husband, we have chosen not to have children.
Mhm.
We have cats.
Mhm.
When people come to our home, they're just like, oh, it's clear that you're like living your own weird little way. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, yeah.
So I can relate very much to this
Yeah.
archetype, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And I love some of the examples you bring up. I mean, some, quick, obvious ones are like Miss Havisham, Norma Desmond. I love that you bring up Auntie Mame.
Oh, that's a witch
that
house.
blew my mind
That's a
because
witch
I
house,
was
yeah.
like, of course, she's this like bon vivant,
Mhm.
older,
Mhm.
single woman.
Yep.
And she just decorates however the fuck she wants. She
Yeah.
doesn't have kids.
Kind of magically. Her home just transforms different styles with kind of seemingly no effort.
Yeah.
And it's not only that, she kind of forms her own family in the way that makes sense for her, that makes her happy. Like a coven.
Yes.
It's a collection of people that are important to you.
Chosen family.
Your chosen family.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the house is for her. It's not for other people. It's not for entertaining necessarily. It's not to make other people happy. It's not to look impressive. It's for that person to do whatever it is they want to in that space, regardless of what anybody else thinks.
You don't write about this one in the book, but it made me think of Harold and Maude a little bit, like Maude's house.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
No.
No,
I mean,
my mind is like going, oh my God, that's totally a witch house.
Yeah, because she just so lives on her own and obviously then starts, having her own sexual escapade with a young man, which is also very taboo.
Yeah.
But there are 3 that you write about, and hopefully we'll have time to touch on all of them. You blew my mind when you wrote about Grey Gardens as a witch house and when you first presented it at the conference. So talk about that. Talk about Big and Little Edie as witches.
Yeah. I won't give a whole summary of the documentary because I think it's pretty well known.
I'll just jump in and say,
yeah.
Grey Gardens, it's one of the best documentaries ever made. And it's essentially about, they're Jacqueline Kennedy's cousins.
Cousins, yeah.
And so they come from wealth.
Mm-hmm.
They live in this mansion, essentially, but they can't afford upkeep.
Yeah.
It's a mother and a daughter, both named Edie. And so the documentary is just the 2 of them living in like this decaying, kind of disgusting
kind
mansion.
Of squalor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But having a fucking ball doing it.
Yeah.
It's iconic.
Yeah. I'm obsessed with them and their story in this house because when you look at it on the outside, it really is falling apart. It looks disturbing. And in the movie takes place after a renovation. Like their cousin, Jackie O, saw the house in its condition and paid to get some renovations done. So before the movie, it was much, 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 much worse.
It was worse.
Much worse.
Than what I saw in the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. It was cleaned up. It was cleaned up for the movie.
Get out of here.
Yeah. They moved there, Big Edie. It was their summer home. Again, they grew up wealthy. She loved it. This is in the Hamptons. And she kind of fancied herself an artist. She loved to sing. And she loved to be around artistic people, which her husband did not like or approve of. So she already had this non-conventional kind of bohemian-esque vibe about her. Like she was already not your typical housewife woman.
Yeah.
Right. And her husband ended up leaving her. She had very, very little money. Again, I won't get into all the details of how they lost their money. But her daughter moved back home when she was about 30. And their relationship is so codependent.
That's a mild way of
It's
putting
a mild way of putting it.
They sleep in the same bedroom. Though you bring up that's probably
Yeah.
because it's the
Yeah.
only room that had heat in it. It wasn't
Yeah.
necessarily as weird
Yeah.
as that might have seemed.
But there's holes in the ceiling and there's kind of debris everywhere. But at the same time,
And wild animals
raccoons everywhere.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Just fucking filthy with raccoons, shitty with raccoons.
Everywhere. But they're so in their own kind of joyous world. They're not in denial about the state of their home. They sing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
The lady is changing outfits constantly.
Wearing the best costume of the day.
It's the revolutionary costume. Wearing sweaters as
It's just
hats.
like
It's fantastic.
Quotes on quotes.
Yeah. And it's like, this is their world that for some people, they may not understand it. They may not get it.
Yep.
It may not be appropriate. They were accused of, again, of being crazy cat ladies, and they were thought of as being like these poor old dears, or whatever. They're staunch.
Yeah.
These are staunch women. So to automatically feel sorry for them for the state of their home is missing them completely, I think. There's an idea also that having your belongings be that important to you. That's the other thing. They were wealthy, but they don't care about their home.
Yeah.
They are supposed to be for money. This is the Hamptons,
Yeah.
right? But the preciousness of objects, of things, are not important to them.
Yeah. It's kind of zen.
It really is. It really is.
I mean, that's like the loveliest way of putting it, perhaps.
Yeah.
But they're definitely like living on their own terms.
Yeah.
And that makes them kind of witchly, this feminine being who just is unapologetically subversive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So there are two other ones that I want to make sure we talk about in the witch house section. There's the house in Suspiria, one of my favorite films.
Yes.
And then there's the house, and I think these are pretty closely related, in a film you turned me on to, which is Gretel and Hansel.
Yeah.
I had never seen Gretel and Hansel. It stars Alice Krige. For you Trekkies out there, she was the Borg queen in, what was it? Star Trek First Contact, I think. She's also the star of another witch film I love called She Will, which is so good, and so underrated.
Okay.
Anyway, but it's a retelling of the Hansel and Gretel story.
Yeah.
And Alice Krige is Hulda. She's the witch.
Mm-hmm.
And both of these spaces, the dance school in Suspiria and also the house in Gretel and Hansel, I feel like there's like resonance between them. Why did you include both of them in the witch house section?
Both of them have sort of an exterior purpose, an exterior front, and then a real interior that is sort of the space of power, the space of magic. In Suspiria, it's a dance school.
Mm-hmm.
And that's supposedly all it is, right? But when you get into the layers of it, it's a coven, right?
Yes, it is.
And it is so luscious and crazy
Opulent.
and beautiful, opulent,
prismatic, lurid, gorgeous. One of the most beautiful.
And very feminine in a weird ways. Yeah.
That is my fantasy of a space. I mean, without, all the nefarious goings on, but like just aesthetically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lush.
Yeah. But also intimidating because it is not subtle at all. It's not a particularly warming, homey environment. It feels intimidating.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's grand.
It's grand. And again, it's for their own singular purpose.
Yes.
But it's not black. It's not dingy. It is extraordinarily bright and colorful and extreme and patterns everywhere.
Yes.
And it's gorgeous, which is kind of the opposite of what we think a quote unquote witch house should be.
Yep.
They're supposed to be dark and they're supposed to be, I would almost say humble.
Mm-hmm.
They're supposed to be small or somehow, like a little hut in the forest.
Mm-hmm.
In Gretel and Hansel, it's a retelling of Hansel and Gretel, but the house is not made of candy. Oz Perkins directed it, and that was the big shift in direction from the traditional story. They're like, they just don't want it to look like another gingerbread house.
Mm-hmm.
But architecturally, it's fascinating.
Oh,
it's
so
absolutely
good.
gorgeous.
It's so good.
It's jet black. It's very minimal. It's kind of Nordic in a way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of Nordic, but also kind of a craft house.
It's like pretty Instagrammable, I'll say.
Totally.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Part of it's an A-frame, and then there's an extension in the side.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is, and also most of these Hansel and Gretel stories, it's sort of placed somehow in the woods exactly when they need it.
Yeah.
They run across the house when they're lost, trying to starve to death. But Holda's house is the front. The first floor is warm and it's overabundant with food.
Delicious.
Like they walk in and she lives by herself.
Mm-hmm.
She lives by herself, but there's a table that is overflowing with food. So it's still that temptation. It's still, providing the thing that they need. In Suspiria, it was all that crazy color.
Yep.
In Gretel and Hansel, it's darkness, but with this warmth interior.
Yeah.
But in the inside, the house, below the house
Yeah.
where the sausage gets made, so
Yeah.
to speak,
In the basement. Yes.
totally different architecturally. It's very concrete, super high ceilings, very cold, very kind of clinical. But that's the witch space. That's where
Yeah.
the magic happens.
Yeah.
The homey part is the temptation to get the kids in to have their home
This
warmy
is
part.
so interesting because you're making me realize that the house in Suspiria and this house, they both have the subterranean space.
Yes.
Where the witch really does
Yeah.
her work.
Yeah. There's the
That does
exterior
look
presence.
so different.
Yeah. And then there's the real sort of authentic space below the surface. Yeah.
I mean, I love the entire book, but of course that section in particular just like made me so happy. There are so many other types of houses you cover. Obviously, we don't have time to go through them all. And obviously, we want everybody to actually read Sick Houses, which is so exquisite. But I did want to circle back to your own autobiography. Like, I understand that your dad is or was an architect.
He's an architect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your mom is or was an anthropologist.
Yep.
Yes.
It kind of makes
I
sense.
mean, it's so perfect, the Venn diagram of it all.
Yeah.
But you also reveal in this book you moved 14 times over the course of your life.
Yeah.
And I imagine that gives you a unique perspective, all of these different threads of your biography, into homes and spaces.
Yeah.
How has it made you rethink your relationship to home and haunted spaces or sick spaces? I hope you live in a well space.
Yeah.
How does this affect you personally, thinking about all these things?
I'm always fascinated by people who have lived in the same house their whole lives.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was a child, we moved 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, 5 times, 4 times, 5 times. And then I went to college, and then I moved many other times. But I never really had a home. I kind of had to pick and choose which I wanted to call home.
Mm-hmm.
So depending who I would talk to, if someone said, "Where are you from?" I would say Detroit, because the house that we lived in is the one that felt the most like home, is that house.
Why? Why did it feel that way more than the other spaces, do you think?
We lived in apartments a lot, so this was an actual house.
Mm-hmm.
It also was old. It also kind of had weird secrets, it felt like. There was like what do you call it? Like, was it a dumbwaiter? The kind of chute with the little elevator?
A dumbwaiter.
One of those things, which seemed kind of mysterious and kind of creepy. There was a double staircase. It was old, and it felt like ours, very much so.
Yeah.
And it was also probably the time in my life where I was old enough to kind of be wandering around the streets and do my own thing with my friends, but also young enough to be hopelessly romantic and believe in magic and vampires and stuff.
Yeah.
So there was this great crossover between the feeling that this space is mine, while emotionally, psychically, or whatever, I was starting to grow and experiment and become a person. And you need a safe space. I think you need a safe space to be able to grow, to be able to experiment, to be able to fantasize and dream and things like that. Because if you don't have that kind of physical security, I think it's lacking.
Yeah.
I think you can't really let yourself go in that way. So that's the house that feels the most like home to me because of how I felt inside of it.
Yeah.
That's
But
what made
that's
it
so
home.
much about what your whole book is about. It's
Yeah.
like, how do you feel in these spaces?
Yeah.
Whether it's physically or your imaginal existence in these spaces, your spiritual existence.
That's the house where, we do the Ouija board with my friend,
Yeah.
where I had an out-of-body experience.
Ooh, Leila.
Unwillingly, but I did. And that
In
was crazy.
Detroit? The Detroit
In the
house?
house, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I was lying in bed, and I was not asleep, and I was just kind of chilling, relaxing, and I felt myself lift out of my body.
Yeah.
Up, I could see my roof.
Yes.
I could see the street.
Astral projection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That kind of golden thread
Yes.
that they talk about. I
Yes.
saw it, and I was hovering, and I saw my house. And then I thought, this is kind of scary. And I immediately zoomed back into my body.
Whoa.
It was amazing.
That's incredible. And that's
Yeah.
never happened since.
No.
You do write in the
Yeah.
book, however, and I won't give this away,
Yeah.
and you shouldn't either,
Yeah.
because it's a reveal. But you talk about a haunted, potentially apartment you lived in here in New York City in Brooklyn.
Not too far from here.
Ooh. And so this is a nosy question, but in our final moments together, I'm wondering, like, what's your relationship like to your home now? And has writing this book made you reorient yourself to your living space?
I would say my space is not sick.
Good.
It's
good.
It has its faults.
It's New York City. Of course it does.
I live above a guy who plays guitar and sings Oasis songs really loudly.
No. We
But-
need to banish that entity. Seriously, I might be able to help you with that, P.S. We'll talk offline.
Oh my
but
God,
anyway,
please, yeah.
in a healthy, safe way.
Right.
Yeah, I promise.
Take whatever I can get.
Exactly.
Nothing about it feels off or wrong. And I don't get that feeling that I know people get. A lot of people get when you walk into a space and it just doesn't feel right.
Gives you the oogs.
Yeah. And this is, I think it was built in like the 30s or something like that.
Mhm.
So who knows how many people have lived in that space, lived and died
Yeah.
in that space and what happened in that space. But I don't think whatever happened, I don't think they stuck around.
Good.
Or if they did stick around, they don't care about me being there.
Do you have either rituals or items that you carry with you, no matter where you're living, that make it feel like
Oh.
home?
I think one of the things I love about moving to a new space is I don't know if there's a specific thing, but I love the practice or the ritual of finding new spaces for the tchotchkes. I have the, kind of wind up music toy thing
That
from my
sounds
childhood.
Creepy, Leila. Is it haunted?
It's not haunted.
Okay. All right.
It's
Just
not
checking.
haunted.
I don't know with you, Leila. I had to check in.
It is a classic haunted
Beautiful.
object type
Yes,
thing.
yes.
But finding like the place to put this object now, finding the place to hang the pictures on the wall, like where do the things that I love, where are they going to live in this space? And I do love that kind of ritual. Like there's a scene in Amityville Horror really early on. They have to decide like where to hang the crucifix,
Yes.
And I love that moment in moving into new spaces, though. Where do we hang the crucifix?
Oh,
Practice.
Fabulous. Fabulous. Do you have a literal crucifix that you
I
hang?
don't.
Okay.
I don't have a crucifix.
Interesting. Well, so maybe you're inviting in vampires.
Exactly.
But I feel like that'd be okay with you.
I'm fine with that. Inviting in. That's
There
fine
you
with
go.
me.
There
Yeah.
you go. Well, I'm so glad that you live in a well space now. That makes me so happy. And I'm just so glad that this book is out in the world. Leila, tell the good people, what do you have coming up?
Mhm.
I know you're going to be promoting the book out in
Yeah.
the real world. I know people are going to want to follow you online and elsewhere. Just do all the plugging, please.
Well, I'm having a reading, a launch with Morbid Anatomy, and that's going to be at Barrow's Tasting Hall in Industry City in Brooklyn.
Yum.
And that's going to be on the 12th of February. I'm going to be doing a dual reading with a friend of mine who has a book coming out that's very different with St. Dominic Petman at KGB Bar on the 27th.
I love
I
that
think that is.
space.
Yeah.
Talk about a good haunted
Right?
space.
That's gonna be
yeah,
cool.
it's filled with ghosts.
Yeah. Those are the two kind of in-person
Mhm.
things I'm doing. I'm on Blue Sky. I used to be on other things.
Yes.
But I'm not on those
same.
things anymore.
I've made that migration as well. Yes.
I think it's just Leila Taylor
Mm-hmm.
at Blue Sky.
Yep. And are you on
.com.
Instagram as well?
I'm on Instagram. I'm taking a breather at the moment.
So wise.
Yeah. We'll see how much I'm on Instagram. It probably is fine now, but I'm trying to wean away. It's
Well,
hard.
Instagram is now filled with news about the great haunted house that is the White
Oh,
House.
God, yes.
Which I'm sure there's lots to say about the ghosts in there.
Yeah.
My goodness. But
Yeah.
anyway, I'm trying to end things on a positive note, Leila. I'm glad you're taking some mental health space away from the things that you need to.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad that you're going to be promoting sick houses. I hope to come to some of those events myself if I'm able
Yeah,
to. And
yeah.
everybody just needs to get this book, Sick Houses, Haunted Homes, and the Architecture of Dread by Leila Taylor. Leila, thank you so much for writing this book. Thank you so much for sharing it with me. And thank you so much for coming back on the Witch Wave.
Thank you for having me. This is so much fun.
That's it for the show. Thank you again to Leila Taylor for haunting the Witch Wave house with me. Do you have questions, feedback, need some witchly advice, or just want to share something magical that happened to you recently? Drop us an email or voice message over at witchwavepodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you, and you just might make it on the Witch Wire. The Witch Wave is a Phantasmophile production written and produced by me, Pam Grossman. This episode was recorded, edited, and mixed by Josh Wilcox and/or Walter Nordquist and myself. Our theme music is the song Hand and I by Lycanthia. Our new Witch Wave logo was designed by Thunderwing. Special thanks go to Matt Freeman, Laura Antal, and Cece Pascal. You can check out information about this and other episodes on our website, and now buy Witch Wave merch at witchwavepodcast.com. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at witchwavepod, and you can check out my witch emoji for iPhone by going to witchemoji.com or downloading it in the App Store. My books Waking the Witch from Gallery Books and Witchcraft from Taschen are available everywhere now. And if you want more Witch Wave or you would just like to support the show, please join us over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/witchwave. Thank you so much for listening. Witches are the future. I'll catch you next time on The Witch Wave.